2 days after Christmas, and almost 7 days after entering Ortona, the Canadians finally reached the center of the town, the square of the Cathedral of San Tommaso, and an eerie quiet falls over the ruins of the city.
This is the Basilica of San Tommaso. One of the most famous photographs from the Ortona fighting is of this church literally sheared in half by a German explosion. You can actually see over here where they've incorporated some of the original building in the reconstruction. On December 27th, Canadian troops were in this area, and the Germans were close to being cut off, so they decided to evacuate the town. On December 28th, Ortona was in Canadian hands, and it was a great victory for Canada.
The Canadians have driven the elite German paratroopers from Ortona, but the battle has left the city in ruins, where more than 1,000 Italian civilians are dead. The muddy, bloody battle has also left the Allied plan to capture Rome by the end of the year 1943 in ruins.
This is Peter Sturzberg of the CBC reporting from the Italian front. For the dead of Ortona, the bell of its cathedral, the Cathedral of St. Thomas the Apostle, tolls. For the Canadians who died in taking the town, the bell tolls.
There are rows of Edmontons and C4s buried in this cemetery, all killed in the street fighting in Ortona. This is Private C.E. Wells, C4th Highlanders, killed 27th December 1943. Precious memories, treasured ever, of days when we were all together. This is Private G. Yellowfly, also C-Force, 27th December 1943. The sun shines, waters flow, the grass grows. Like these, our memories of you shall live forever.
In the new year, the Allies will have a new plan to capture Rome, and the Canadians will once again go into battle, this time at the Leary Valley. Monte Cassino, Italy. For more than 1,000 years, this ancient monastery has overlooked the Leary Valley, which leads to Rome. In early 1944, the Germans have fortified the mountains and the valley here to stop the Allies from reaching Rome. Three times the Allies tried to break through at the Leary Valley, but each time the Germans pushed them back. By spring, little is left of the monastery, but the Germans are still defending a major defensive line across the Leary Valley, the Adolf Hitler Line. And now the Canadians are ordered to spearhead the attack on the Hitler Line, the last barrier before Rome.
This is the Leary Valley, the gateway to Rome. In early 1944, the Allies launched 3 attacks at Cassino trying to break into the valley. And in May 1944, they were going to try a 4th. And this time, the Canadians were going to play a major role in the battle for Rome.
In spring, the Leary Valley is usually a peaceful landscape of wheat fields, poppies, and small farms. But in May 1944, the Germans had prepared a 20-kilometer killing ground of steel and concrete in waiting for the Canadian attack.
This is the Leary Valley, the location of the infamous Adolf Hitler line. Today, little of the line remains, but there are a few remnants. This is a Panzerturm, and it's a real nifty piece of German engineering. A three-man crew would operate a tank turret, which would rotate around this hole here, firing cannon or anti-tank shells or machine guns. The Hitler line was full of these things. Every 1,000 yards had about 15 of them. They'd have machine gun posts behind them, anti-tank weapons, and of course each one of these weapons would be mutually supportive. In addition, out in front, they'd have minefields and barbed wire, and it was against these positions that the Canadians attacked in May 1944. It's hard to imagine what it was like, and the only way I can think of is looking at Charles Comfort's famous painting, The Breaking of the Hitler Line.
As the guns open up to prepare the Canadian assault, with the 1st Canadian Division moving into the Leary Valley, waiting their turn to join the attack, is the Perth Regiment. And serving with the Perths is 20-year-old Stan Cisłowski.
Well, I was always war-minded in respect to the history of it. When I was a kid, I read World War I history. I'd walk 10 blocks to a library to get books on it, and I just lived it. In the beginning, I was upbeat. It says I had aspirations of becoming a hero. But when that first mortar bomb landed, I cut my aspirations down a little bit. Then next few mortars, and pretty soon I wanted to get the heck out of here. A guy can get killed. No sooner we got into the Leary Valley, we had to dig trenches, and we were hungry and thirsty. And every time we were fed, there was a pervasive odor of decomposing body. I didn't know where it was, so I went looking for it and found a whole leg of a man. And I had to carry that out and throw it on the other side of the hill so I could start eating. I didn't break down. I don't know why, but I didn't break. I just had to look at it and say, well, that's not me. What else could I do?
While the Perths wait in reserve, thousands of Canadian troops are poised to attack the Adolf Hitler line. Dawn, May 23rd. The Allied artillery barrage begins, and a half a dozen Canadian regiments move forward through the wheat fields and small farms of the Leary Valley towards the Adolf Hitler line. With the Seaforth Highlanders of Canada is an American volunteer, Charles Munro Johnson.
We lined up in the Leary Valley, thousands of men and hundreds of tanks. The German observers on the mountains could see every one of us and could tell whether or not we had our collars buttoned. Here in the valley, there were just wheat fields and fighting men. There were no ditches or rocks to give us cover.
This is a typical Italian farm in the Leary Valley. And it was one of dozens that was woven into the Adolf Hitler line. And today it's a functioning farm, but there's still evidence of the fighting that took place in 1944.
few German shells began to plop about us, tearing down trees and throwing down fragments of metal. Then Jimmy called out, "Let's go!" The line moved forward among the shell bursts like the beginning of a cross-country run. So this was it.
Over here, there's a large palm tree that bears the scars of war. You can see the holes made by the Canadian shells. I'm sure of all calibers. It's hard to tell now because it's grown up so much. But the reason this tree was getting hit so often is over here. Underneath this rubble is a panzer term. Of course, the turret's gone, but the hole's still there, and that's where they would house the three-man crew. And beside it is an even larger bunker, and it appears that maybe a Panther was there, but the whole thing was destroyed in May '44. But you can see why the Germans put it here, because you can get an incredible view of the Leary Valley.
Directly ahead of Jerry held a machine gun in his arms. A long burst tore into the 8th platoon to my right. I fired 2 rounds from the hip. The Jerry folded up and fell. I stepped on his bloody head as I passed over the position a few seconds later.
On the morning of May 23, 1944, the Canadians renewed their assault on the Adolf Hitler line. This whole area came alive with tanks and men moving up to the front, and the race for Rome was on.
Points of German resistance were overrun. The Germans must have been surprised by the fact that no one of us stopped for any reason, even to help the wounded. I came upon little Seabolt, the friend of mine from 8th Platoon. He was on his hands and knees. As I looked down at a gaping wound in his back, he called out, "Am I hit?" I replied, bending down, "You bet you are." The wound, which had been caused by shrapnel, was about 7 inches long and revealed his ribs. He glanced at my left leg and said, "Where'd you get that?" Only then did I become aware of the wound in my left thigh.
May 24th, the Adolf Hitler line is broken, and the 5th Canadian Armored Division races forward as the Germans retreat, leaving thousands of their dead behind in the Leary Valley. For the Canadians, victory in the Leary Valley has not been cheap.
In the hospital, I learned that Needham was dead. Scholarly Ross and Rebel Harris were killed. Cowboy Dykes and Halhead, too, were dead. Fine was also killed.